This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
President Abdelmadjid Tebboune affirmed that bringing forward the presidential elections was purely linked to technical reasons, stressing that it will not affect the deadline or the progress of the elections. And the president expressed his conviction that the state of Palestine will obtain the status of permanent member of the United Nations. And at least 14 Palestinians were killed and scores of others wounded in artillery fire and attacks carried out today by the Israeli occupation against various parts of the Gaza Strip. And those were the major developments. Now the Full News edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has pointed out that his supreme objective is that Algeria recovers the grandeur that it has enabled her to accomplish various achievements in the past. During his interview with national media representatives, the President of the Republic expressed his gratitude to all devoted patriots who ensure the well-being of citizens and the upgrading of their living conditions. The President said Algeria's objective is to regain her position that allowed her to make remarkable achievements in several areas in the past, notably political and diplomatic achievements in favor of liberation movements around the world. The President affirmed that he has a special bond of affection with the Algerian people, particularly young people. Meanwhile, the President of the Republic stressed that the trust he placed in young people had allowed Algeria to become a leader in the creation of startups in Africa, recalling that he was a candidate of young people during the 2019 presidential election. Answering a question about his candidacy at the presidential election scheduled for September 7, the President said it was early to comment on this topic, adding that he still has 5 months in his current term to keep implementing his program and carry out field visits to several provinces across the country.
Exact.
وما نجاوبكش لأن افونلار ني با لور، واعتقد أنه ماهوش وقتها. هذا برنامج تاعي، برنامج مازال في 5 شهور قبل الانتخابات.
هل لنا أن نعرف بالتحديد الولايات التي ستزورونها خلال الفترة المتبقية؟
هو اللي أكيد 5 تيسمسيل تيجي وزو هذه، وربما جانت ربما يعني مازال ما حددناش من هي الأولى والثانية والثالثة، ممكن تكون فيه ولايات أخرى. أنا شخصيا صراحة عندي رغبة كبيرة باش نزور قسنطينة، راني في مدة ما رحت ليهاش وألفتها وألفوني هما الناس تاع قسنطينة، وإن شاء الله نمشي لها كذا قسنطينة. في شيلا قسنطينة، فيه باتنا، فيه تيارت، فيه.
And regarding the decision to organize an early presidential election on September 7th, President Tebboune affirmed that it was purely linked to technical reasons, stressing that bringing forward the presidential elections will not affect their deadline or the progress of the elections.
والمنطلق الأساس تاع التغيير التوقيت هذا هو أن شهر ديسمبر ماهوش الشهر الحقيقي تاع الانتخابات. الانتخابات كنا نعرف أن في 2019 بعد استقالة الرئيس المرحوم رحمه الله كان فيه تولي سلطة من طرف رئيس مجلس الأمة مع تحديد الوقت تاع الانتخابات. مع الأسف الوقت ما سمحش الانتخابات، وقع فيه تمديد آخر إلى آخره. يعني 12 ديسمبر ماهوش التاريخ الرسمي تاعنا تاع الجزائر اللي متعودين فيه الانتخابات، والأسباب تقنية محضة ما تأثر لا على ضرورة الانتخابات ولا على كيفية سيرورة الانتخابات، والباقي كله فلسفة وتكهنات.
Regarding the national community abroad, the President said Algerian nationals will be able to register on provisional electoral lists at the level of Algerian consulates as of next week. As for Algerians in an irregular situation abroad, he requests their regularization and the obtaining of their passports. The President of the Republic affirmed that this file will be resolved in 2 months at the latest. Regarding his visit to France, President Abdelmadjid Tebboune said it is still relevant, stressing that relations with France need need a refoundation without giving up a single detail in the memory file. Regarding the socio-economic field, the president affirmed that the measures taken in advance by the state to make available consumer products had ensured the stability of prices during Ramadan. The president of the Republic also mentioned the plan to double salaries by 2026-2027, emphasizing that the GDP will exceed $400 billion during the first quarter of 2026.
Fin 2025, début premier trimestre, fin semestre 2026, le PIB نتاعنا ان شاء الله va dépasser les 400 milliards de dollars, inchallah.
Fin 2026.
Maximum en cours de 2026. On arrivera, le taux de croissance تاعنا, on va le maintenir. On va essayer d'arriver à 2026-2027 avec le reste de ce qui reste pour doubler les salaires. C'est-à-dire on est à 47%, nous نزيدها 53% تاعها. باش نولي حقت المرتبات الى زياده تاع 100%. فهمت؟ Ça c'est des indices de développement.
And after hailing the success of the 7th Summit of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum held in Algiers, the President of the Republic affirmed that Algeria would invest and produce even more in the field of natural gas. We're still with the interview of the President of the Republic, and he said that the Maghreb bloc that the countries of the region intend to create aims at relaunching the Common Maghreb Action and coordinate efforts to unify the voice of these countries on various international issues without excluding anyone. Miriam Borshi has the details.
During his periodic interview with the national media representative, President Tebboune stressed that because of the current vacuum and the absence of a common Maghreb action, it was decided to organize North African meetings without excluding any party, adding that the door is open to everyone. He hoped that the bloc will be a beneficial initiative for the countries of the region by bringing together and unifying their voices on issues of common concern, adding that the bloc is not directed against any other state and the door is open to the region's countries. Regarding the latest developments in Mali and Niger, the president affirmed that Algeria has never imposed itself on these countries and that she has always maintained good relations with her neighbors since independence. He said every time a conflict breaks out in neighboring Mali, Algeria intervenes to reconcile the parties, adding that even the UN asked Algeria to coordinate reconciliation between Malian parties. He added that if the parties at issue in Mali or Niger decline Algeria's help, Algeria will respect that, as she has never been a colonial state nor a country that exploits other countries' resources, but she rather acts on the basis of the principle of brotherliness. The president said Algeria has never spared a single effort to defend the territorial integrity of Mali and the unity of Malian people. Regarding the Western Sahara issue, the president affirmed that it was a just cause on the UN agenda, emphasizing that its settlement is not directed against the brotherly Moroccan people, but it is a decolonization issue, stressing that Algeria is using reason instead of threat and force to reach a solution.
And with regard to the Palestinian issue, the President of the Republic expressed his conviction that the State of Palestine will obtain the status of permanent member of the United Nations. Mohammed Khatil has more.
The President of the Republic said that for 4 years, Algeria has been fighting relentlessly for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, adding that Algeria has brought together the Palestinian diaspora and mobilized the Arab League, and today there is a real hope for the State of Palestine to obtain permanent membership in the United Nations. Tebboune said that the battle that Algeria is currently waging indicates that it is high time for Palestine to become a full member of the United Nations, even if it's occupied, adding that Palestine will be a member of the United Nations and he will not leave the battlefield until this goal is achieved. This, he went on to say, is the principle of Algeria, regardless of what others say. And thanks to our credibility, Palestine will obtain the status of permanent member after it already became an observer member.
المعركة اللي قام بها الجزائر وأنا باسم الجزائر باسم الجزائريات والجزائريين لما أخذت الكلمة في الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة قلت آن الأوان أن فلسطين تصبح عضو كامل حقوق وكامل العضوية في الأمم المتحدة ولو محتلة. فلسطين تكون عضو دائم في الأمم المتحدة وما نتركش ميدان المعركة حتى نوصل للنتيجة هذه إن شاء الله. حب نحب وكره من كره. احنا هذا مبدأنا بغض النظر على واش يقول فلان ولا فلتان. فلسطين تدخل كعضو كامل في الأمم المتحدة. احنا دخلناها كعضو ملاحظ، جاء الوقت اليوم باش ندخلوها كعضو كامل وبالمصداقية نتاعنا إن شاء الله.
Evoking the ongoing genocide perpetrated against the innocent Palestinian people in the occupied territories, notably in Gaza and the West Bank, the President of the Republic recalled that the UN Security Council, which had failed since the start of the Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip approximately 6 months ago to adopt a resolution demanding a ceasefire, succeeded for the first time thanks to the initiative of Algeria and the support of African brothers including Mozambique and Sierra Leone, in addition to Peru, as part of the Gas Summit held here in Algeria to adopt a resolution on a ceasefire. He underlined that it's a victory for the good over evil before being a victory for Algeria or Africa. Whatever the motives and reasons, the President went on to say, there is no crime more heinous than dropping a 10-quintal bomb on houses.
منذ بداية العدوان على الفلسطينيين مجلس الأمن كان فاشل، أول مرة بإعاز من الجزائر وبالأخص بمساعدة أشقائنا الأفارقة. ما ننساش اللي كنا تكلمنا في الموضوع مع سيراليون، مع موزمبيق، مع البيرو لما جاو هنا تاع الغاز، تفاهمنا كاع على أساس باش تكون القارات 5 تكون متفقة على شيء تحت إعاز، يعني بإعاز من الجزائر بالطبع. يعني احنا مثلنا العرب وجزء من أفارقة. أعتقد أنه انتصار للحق قبل ما يكون انتصار للجزائر ولا لإفريقيا ولا العالم العربي، وانتصار للحق ضد الباطل. لأن مهما كان الحال، مهما كانت الأسباب والمسببات، ما فيش جريمة أبشع من أنك تطلق قنبلة توزن 10 قناطر طن كامل على سكانات.
And that was the statement of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. And to the Middle East now, at least 14 Palestinians were killed and scores of others wounded in artillery fire and attacks carried out today by the Israeli occupation against various parts of the Gaza Strip. The details with Majid Mila, who is with me in the studio. Hi, Majid.
Hi, Asia. Indeed, the news agency WAFA stressed that the bombardments targeted the central part of Gaza, as well as the eastern and western areas of Khan Yunis in the southern part of the territory. The Palestinian Red Crescent affirmed that the operations launched by the Israeli army were underway in the Al Amal hospital in the southern part of Gaza. The Israeli relentless bombardments have claimed over 32,700 lives so far and caused the destruction of large parts of the territory. According to the United Nations, the attacks targeting the Palestinian territory for over 5 months has caused the displacement of 2.4 million people who are now facing famine. Fighting has continued in Gaza despite the recent adoption by the United Nations Security Council of a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and for an access to humanitarian aid. Meanwhile, negotiations are resuming today in Cairo to try and secure a truce. Several rounds of negotiations have been held as part of a mediation undertaken by the United States, Egypt and Qatar, but failed to achieve any breakthrough so far. Back to you, Asia.
Thank you, Majid. And in Syria, at least 8 people were killed and more than 20 others were wounded in the explosion of a car bomb in a market in Aleppo in the northern part of Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights stressed that the explosion caused considerable damage. And Cuba's president has called on the international community to take action to end the genocide taking place in Gaza. In a statement posted on X, he said that as long as Palestinian land continues to be tormented and destroyed to its foundations, the Cubans will continue to denounce the crime. And in Lebanon, 3 UN observers and their Lebanese translator were wounded in an explosion in the southern part of the country near the Lebanese-Israeli border. Majid Mira.
In Lebanon, 3 UN observers and their Lebanese translator were wounded in an explosion in the southern part of the country near the Lebanese-Israeli border. The United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, peacekeepers were patrolling in the demarcation line, also called Blue Line, established by the United Nations between Lebanon and the occupied Israeli territory. The incident, involving the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization observers, took place amid an increasing deadly violence on the border. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed his concerns at the continued exchanges of fire at the Blue Line. The Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati condemned the incident as a dangerous which was denounced by the Foreign Affairs Minister as a violation of international law.
And tens of thousands of demonstrators have taken to the streets in several American cities to protest against the ongoing Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip. According to the news agency Wafa, more than 30,000 people demonstrated in New York against the atrocities perpetrated by the Israeli occupying forces against the innocent civilians in the Palestinian enclave. And to Ecuador now, at least 8 people have been killed and 8 others wounded in an armed attack in southwestern Ecuador in the latest escalation of violence in the country. Police sources said in a statement that several armed subjects aboard a vehicle opened fire on a group of people in the port city of Guayaquil. Meanwhile, 5 tourists in the seaside resort of Ayampe were kidnapped and killed on Friday by drug traffickers who mistook them for members of a rival gang, according to police reports. 14 hours 46 minutes Algeria's time. Is listening to Radio Algeria International, and that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week.
The international event of the week.
The UN Security Council voted a resolution this week calling for an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan and stressing that the urgent need of increasing the flow of aid into Gaza. The resolution tabled by the Council's 10 non-permanent members known as E10 and which insisted on the necessity to ensure humanitarian access to Gaza secured 14 votes against one abstention, the United States. It was the first time since the Israeli army launched its attacks on Gaza that the US abstained from vetoing a resolution presented by the other UN Security Council's members demanding a cessation of hostilities in Gaza. Asked on whether the US decision to abstain from vetoing the resolution voted this week by the UN Security Council marked a breaking off with the Israeli Prime Minister's criticized strategy in Gaza, our political analyst from California had this to say.
U.S. decision to abstain was driven by internal and external pressure, a result of its unconditional support for Israel. Internally, it occurs in the midst of an electoral campaign for legislative and presidential elections. The Democratic administration is in a difficult position, caught in between a powerful Israeli AIPAC lobby that contributes large donations to these elections with huge influence in Congress and also in the presidency. On the other hand, you have the Democratic base that is slipping away to vote either uncommitted or stay home. As we have seen in Michigan and Wisconsin in the primaries last month, over 100,000 people voted as uncommitted, not wanting to give their vote to President Biden. On the international level, the United States may have thought that there is too much risk to veto this resolution because of what's happening in Gaza and because of the isolation that the United States appears to be in internationally. This is all for its continued support for Israel unconditionally. Based on this calculation, the United States thought best to abstain. However, it is very important to note that the United States position remains faithful to the Zionist states. What is noticeable is that the U.S. top representative at the United Nations took little time to pledge that the resolution was not binding. That statement clearly could say that it was designed to undermine the historical significance of the vote on the Palestinian cause. And also we could see Israel's last decision not to send a delegation for talk in Washington, D.C., is another indication of the extent to which the resolution impacted Israel and United States position on the war in Gaza. In this context, the decision to abstain was in line with America's strategic goals and domestic interests as far as Biden is interested. While on the surface, it appears as if the United States is breaking away from Netanyahu, the subsequent decision, another narrative, or a lack of taking a strong stand, a practical stand by the U.S. in support of Gaza, shows that the current administration, while it's personalizing the differences it has with Netanyahu, those personalization of the conflict have not caused any change in United States' continued and unconditional support to the Jewish states.
The resolution on a ceasefire in Gaza, adopted this week by the UN Security Council, was hailed by Palestine's ambassador to the UN, who said that it must be a turning point towards saving lives on the ground and ending the atrocities perpetrated against the Palestinian people. In a similar move, Algeria's representative to the UN said that the resolution adopted this week would put an end to the massacres that have been going on for months and would help meet the aspiration of the Palestinians. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who on many occasions denounced as unacceptable the disastrous humanitarian situation in Gaza, said that the long-awaited resolution must be implemented, saying that it will be unforgivable that the UN Security Council failed to do so. Asked if the UN Security Council could secure the implementation of the resolution in the absence of a cohesive mechanisms, our political analyst had the following.
I think it's from the outset, it is noteworthy that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2728 is legally binding, despite the current campaign describing it otherwise. Its language is very clear, using the word demand an immediate ceasefire. The resolution is also in line with Article 103 of the United Nations Charter that gives a precedence to United Nations Security Council resolution, including this one. And it is also in line with United Nations General Charter that calls on all members, and that includes Israel. In this context, it becomes the responsibility of the parties involved in this conflict, and that Israel to take immediate action to stop the war. It is also obvious that based on the past few months, one should not be hopeful that Israel will take that action. And it is in this context that perhaps a second United Nations Security Council, by the rules of the Security Council, could be brought, this time around demanding that Israel takes legal action. And that possibly will put United States, United States will find itself using its veto right, and it's most likely that resolution may not come to the floor because of the objections of the United States. All this seems to be a bad thing, and knowing what Israel has done, the options are limited. But as a legal international lawyer noted, the fact that the Council could agree on the text after 5 vetoes on the matter is perhaps a shed of hope, meaning that despite what Israel has been doing, not abiding by international law, it is possible that further action, further movement in the United Nations Security Council, along with international pressure in the street, and of course the continued resistance by the Palestinians and the solidarity that is expressed by many in the world, could drive Israel to finally come to its senses, and the United Nations Security Council to hold it accountable.
Recently, the Israeli occupying authorities ordered the confiscation of 800 hectares of land in the West Bank to be used for the construction of new Jewish settlements. The expansion of Jewish settlements considered illegal regarding international law has continued despite growing international opposition. The seizure of 800 hectares in the Jordan Valley is the most important to be carried out by the Israeli authorities since the Oslo Accord in 1993. Asked about the message the Israeli government sought to convey to the US by announcing the most important confiscation of land in years on the day the US Secretary of State arrived in the area. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
What is obvious about this announcement is its timing. It's certainly designed to undermine all international efforts that are designed to stop Israel from continuing its genocide in Gaza. It's also the latest resolution that calls on Israel to immediately cease fire. And also designed to against the United States for abstaining and not using its veto right to stop this latest resolution from being endorsed by the Security Council. Israel in this matter has had control of Jordan Valley for the last 15 years. Many said that what was missing just an announcement. So this announcement this time around aims to send a signal to the United States that is moving forward with building the settlement, and to the international community as well. And this is despite condemnation from the international community. Israel, for example, is in violation of many resolutions, including the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2334 of 2016, which called for Israel to completely cease and immediately cease all settlement activities in the West Bank. The Israelis have not only ignored this kind of communication, but have continued to build settlements. The reports indicate that there are over 700,000 settlers living illegally in the West Bank, and that number equals that of the people who fled during Nakba, Palestine in 1947. So the timing is very, very clear. It is designed to undermine what the achievement that the Palestinian cause has achieved internationally, and to some degree to send a signal to the United States.
Israel's confiscation of 800 hectares was condemned by the EU, the Arab League and several other countries as a violation of international law and a main obstacle to a lasting peace based on a two-state solution.
En ocasión del sagrado mes de Ramadán,